Hello, everyone. My name is Bree Robinson, and I'm the Assistant Athletic Director for Leadership and Diversity. And today on RedHawk Real Talk, we'll be having a conversation about voting. So before we get started in our conversation, I'd like to introduce our guests that are joining us today.
Hi, I'm Melody, and I'm from the tennis team.
Hey guys, I'm Jack Sorensen. I'm a fifth year from Chicago, and I'm on the football team.
Hello, I'm Tori Shriver. I'm a junior on the track team. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
Hi guys, my name is Sam Curran. I'm a junior on the swim and dive team.
Hi, my name is Caleb Schaefer. I'm a sophomore and I'm on the football team.
Hi, my name is Ashlyn Underhill. I'm a sophomore from Carmel, Indiana, and I'm on women's swim.
My name's Casey Siebler, and I'm a senior on the synchronized skating team, and I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
I'm Deanna Hendricks, head women's basketball coach here, originally from Kokomo, Indiana.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So we're going to get right into it, discussing voting. I reached out to many people, and you all agreed to join in this conversation. Why did you agree to be at the table and have a conversation with us today?
I've always been really passionate about voting. When I was in 8th grade, I joined Political Action Club at my middle school, so I wasn't even actually old enough to vote, but we did like a mock election at my school, and we pretended to register people at our middle school. And since then, I've been really passionate about voting and just being able to use your voice and participate in democracy.
So I came out here today to talk about voting because it was my first time voting, and I went to my hometown, Toledo, and already early voted. So I just wanted to come here today and kind of talk about that experience, what it was like, and talk about the importance of it.
So I should have said earlier, but I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia, so I'm an international student. And I guess I agreed to join the conversation here to give my perspective about why it's important for my fellow friends, colleagues, teammates to vote. As an international student, I don't exactly have a voice here in America, yet, I still live here and I still go to school here.
It sounds cliche, but as a woman, there was a point in time where voting wasn't available to everyone, especially minorities and other groups. So I feel like it's really important for us to exercise the right now that we have it.
This will be my first time voting, and so I agreed to enter because I think there's still a lot to learn, especially since I haven't done it before. I thought it would be interesting just to talk with different people because perspective is a big part of making a decision and making a choice. So being able to talk with more people in a place that's safe, I think, is really crucial for a lot of us. And I'm just interested to get to know other people too.
Yeah, I think for me, because this is going to be my first time voting, I think it's just really crucial to be informed on everything that's going on. I think this year is kind of like an interesting year with the candidates that we have. And personally, I feel like a lot of pressures from my family and just other people back home and kind of around me. So I just want to be in a space where it's safe to talk openly and just be informed and learn a little bit about what other people's perspectives are and just have a little bit more knowledge before I go forward and make my vote.
This will also be my first time voting, and there are a lot of my family members who, are in their 60s and 70s who, have told me about how hard they basically had to fight and claw just to get a voice in their own country. And so to me, it's a little more personal just because, I feel like I owe it not only to myself, but to my family. I feel like it would be extremely disrespectful to them not to vote after everything, that they've sacrificed so that people who look like me have a chance to vote. And so I'm very grateful. I just turned 18. I'm 19 now, but this will be my first election. And so really excited to make this, a lifelong tradition of mine and my family's.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's just opening your lens, and hearing other perspectives. And it's an unorthodox conversation to have in the first place. So to be in a safe spot, to just talk through process and logistics and logic as to why you're voting how you are, it's important.
Thank you all. So it's very obvious in hearing your perspectives of why you're here and why you've chosen to join the conversation that many of us are first-time voters. Some of us realize the privileges that maybe some of our ancestors weren't necessarily afforded. And, others of us don't have the privilege of voting in the country where we currently reside. And so that's super important. But I really want to understand what word comes to mind for you, or what words come to mind when I say the word vote, and why.
For me, I think the one word that definitely comes to mind is anxiety. I think people make so many decisions about you based off the person you vote for. They make decisions about like who you are as a person, your characteristics, your values, your morals, all these different things that really don't play into who you pick, but I guess the determining factors for other people. So for me, it kind of drives like an anxious fear of what people's perceptions are going to be of me based off who I pick.
I would say voice is kind of the word that comes to me, because I think, our political system is super complicated and there's a lot of things that go on like higher up that we don't have control over, but we do have control over the person that we vote for. And that's kind of our way of participating in the system. And that's a right that we've been given. And so, we can exercise that. And that's our way to kind of contribute to our democratic system and be able to kind of say the beliefs that we have and the values that we have.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say too, is participation, civic engagement, just being a part of the process. So I think it's very easy to point fingers, ultimately at who's making decisions. But when you're part of a process, you take more ownership. And so I think participation comes to mind.
So many of you talked a little bit about the feelings that you had already associated with voting. I know, Jack, you made mention of it bringing anxiety, and I completely understand. I've had conversations with many people, to say, I think this might be the most nervous I've ever been about voting, but it definitely brings about, and I don't know if this is the right thing to say, but fear. And I think for me personally, I'm trying to make sure that I'm voting in a way that I may not be directly impacted by whatever the issues are that I'm voting in favor of, but maybe there's someone else who may be impacted in a greater way. And so I'm trying to be selfless enough to make that decision. At the same time, people are putting information out there and we don't know if it's true until they actually get in office and they're actually there doing the work. And so I think, Jack, what you said really resonated with me in terms of feeling anxious about going and making a decision, because we realize that people have the ability when they're in a political office to really shape the landscape of our communities where we live. So has anyone in this space had apprehensions about voting altogether?
I think I've had apprehensions in the past. So obviously I've been able to vote for a few years since I'm a junior, but I haven't voted before. And I think my apprehensions were more on those, smaller election cycles where, you're not voting for the big positions in government. And so I felt like I wasn't as educated. So I was kind of apprehensive about voting. But now that it's such a serious election cycle, I wanted to do my research and I feel less apprehensive about it, just because I feel like it's more important now than ever. And I think it's probably important, in the future, that even during those small elections, your vote still matters. So I don't think this is an every 4-year thing. I was kind of apprehensive about that before. And I think that's changed after this election cycle, because again, this is my first big election cycle voting. So I think in the future, that'll definitely be something that changes.
Yeah, like Sam said, this is my second time voting. So I turned 18 in spring 2018, and I'm a big participator in local elections. My father ran for city council twice in my life. The first time I wasn't able to vote, and the second time I was. And because I've seen him go through the process of what it takes to have a campaign and host parties and get your name out and go talk to people, I realized how important local government was compared to every 4 years. I know we really stress about who's the president going to be, but there are other big positions that come every 4 years and even every year, like who you are. Think of your hometown, like who sits on the school board, who sits on the city council, who's making sure that the roads get fixed, who's making sure that lunches are being served in schools. I think those are all really big, important things that aren't the president, that people should realize about voting every year for.
I think Tori makes a really important point. I think sometimes it's easy for us to feel like our vote doesn't matter, when there's so many people in our country. Like, it's easy for people to feel like, oh, if I don't vote, it won't make a difference. But especially in local elections, it does. And even like national elections, if you look at certain states, like whoever like wins the state, it can come down to just like a few thousand votes. So like it's easy to feel, I think, apprehensive and feel like your voice doesn't matter, when in reality, collectively, when we all vote, it matters a lot.
I agree with what Tori was saying. I think it's really important too, and something that I'm a little apprehensive or unsure about is with the national election, it's in the news, it's on social media, it's in the paper, it's talked about just in daily conversations. When you go back home to local government, that's put a little bit more on you. So something like I'm starting to realize is like if I want to be an active participant in my community, because my community at home is also important to me, but I'm going to have to take a little bit of extra time, which I should, but like to go and research the people at home and see like what they're doing, because even though I'm currently in Oxford and I live, my home is somewhere else, that's so important to the people that I love and the community that I was brought up in. And so earlier, Bree had asked what word comes to mind with the word vote. I think for me it's change, because if you want to see a change, then your voice is important. And kind of like what Casey was saying, you can opt out of voting, but that's also like a choice, and you're actively choosing not to participate, if that makes sense. So like by not voting, that's also kind of another choice you're making.
I definitely want to back up that point too. Like, with voting, like I said, I associate voting with responsibility. Me personally, throughout my life, I've seen a lot of people, complain about the way our country is. And if I ask them if they vote, they say no. And so, I feel like when you don't vote, you're simply putting your hands in the future of any and everybody. And that's probably one of the most unreliable places to be in your life. That's why, there's nothing wrong with wanting our country to be better and whatnot. But if you're not using your fundamental right to, put your ticket in the box and make a change, I mean, I feel like, your complaints fall on mostly deaf ears. And so that's why I feel like this more important than ever, especially this year. I've heard any and everybody voice their opinion about this country. And so I hope they're taking these opinions to the ballots, and making their voice heard.
I had brought up logistics earlier, and I think when you talk about apprehension, the actual act of going to the polls can bring up some anxiety. I think just it is an intimidating process. Y'all know I'm secretly about 8 years old, so I've done this quite a bit, and I still get nervous. It's just you arrive, and it's almost like you're walking into a sporting event where it's like teams versus teams, and the crowd is going crazy. It's sort of an overwhelming feeling, and then before that it's the deadline. So it's just, I think it's hard to not have anxiety in some regard when it comes to voting, but the actual act of going to the poll is something that I hope we can all get over and actually do it, but a lot of fear there, I'm sure.
And Melody, I know you as an international student, you have a different perspective. Obviously you don't have the privilege of voting in the United States, but can you share a little bit about your perspective as an international student and why your peers voting matters to you?
Can we cut that? Okay, starting over. So from my perspective, I remember that the last election that happened, I wasn't here in America yet. And I remember just watching on the television about who was going to be elected. But at that time, I kind of just didn't really care about it because I didn't experience the effects of who was going to be the American president. But having lived here for 3 years, I realized that just because I'm not American, how the country works, it does affect me. It does affect my my life. Over the summer, the government they established a rule that I think due to COVID, if the universities are not having face-to-face classes, they were going to deport international students in America, or they're going to prevent like students who are already back home from entering America, which was a big problem because there's a lot of visa issues eventually they canceled that, they revoked it. But it's just things like these that at that moment I remembered I was so anxious about it. A lot of my friends were. And what was really scary about that is that we just don't have control over it. And so as an international student, I think it's so important that you voice your opinion and your right to vote on behalf of your friends, your colleagues, and just your teammates if you have any international teammates.
In athletics, we've talked a lot about empathy, building empathy and being able to take the perspective of other people and really put yourself in their place and try to feel the feelings and the emotions that they have. And, you know, one of the reasons that we developed the Rise Up RedHawks leadership series was to speak to that in many different ways. And so if you remember in August, we had the leadership and participation in voting program. And at the conclusion of that program, we provided nonpartisan resources for you all. And other than the resources that we provided, what other resources have you all used to kind of educate yourselves about the voting process, about maybe even issues that are on the ballot? What have you done to educate yourselves?
Definitely, I have an interesting perspective of this. I helped my dad campaign. I went with him and I watched him talk to people in the community, knock door to door. And along with that, I nannied this summer, and a very close friend of the family that I nannied is running for the House of Representatives. And so I got to know him and his kids through the summer, and we got to have open conversations where I got to ask him, hey, how do you feel about these issues? And he said, this is how I feel. And I think that people really forget that they're human beings and that politicians like to talk and that they like to have conversations and inform you. I know we can't go to Trump or anyone else in the presidential candidacy. I can't go and ask him what his opinions are, but there are tons of people that are volunteers for his campaign, and you are more than welcome to reach out to any of those people. They might not have the most unbiased answers, but they can educate you on the things that you're asking about. So it's definitely going to the sources, going to the politicians if they're local, having a cup of coffee. You don't have to love what they're saying, but you can at least listen and understand what they're saying.
I think this is something that I had a really difficult time with, was trying to figure out different resources that were factual and true. And I did this little experiment that kind of failed miserably, where I was like, all right, I'm going to watch CNN and Fox and look at Twitter for all the same things and try to find like a middle ground of what are the facts? And it messed me up even more just because there's so many different like radical views and like unfactual opinions about topics that it almost made me more confused on what to believe and what to believe as fact versus opinion. That made it kind of really hard to stand firm and like on opinions that I wanted to be strong in, and on facts that I believe are factual. But I think what I found was the biggest resource was talking to people on the team that did have a lot of knowledge and that were very informed, like Caleb, like different people on the team that have taken a really strong stance of their own opinions, and asking them and kind of playing devil's advocate and learning from the resource, like from the people that are experiencing different things that I'm interested about. So I think going to the person has been like that is experiencing what I have questions about is kind of has been the best resource for me, and not necessarily going to these things that are these resources that are so skewed right or left, or just by people's personal opinions and biases.
Another thing that's been nice, I was able to vote with an absentee ballot, so I got mine through the mail. So I found it really helpful to have my ballot in front of me, and then I could research all of the people and their different views rather than having to do that beforehand. So it was really helpful. There's a website, it's called vote411.org, and then it was /Michigan for me since I'm from Michigan, and it had every single like the school board, everyone running for that, and all these like small things, and it had every single person, what their views were, what they said their qualifications were, and it was really helpful to be able to do that research in real time, using like resources online as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't used to pay too much attention to all of the ballot, I'll be honest. I think it was important for me to research the judges specifically, and so what I did this year that I hadn't done is look at the cases they served on and how they voted. So just doing a little bit more of a deeper search of what specifically happened to where they served and how did they vote.
I think also off of kind of what Jack was saying is I think sometimes with candidates, there's so many issues and so many things that it's really like easy to get kind of lost in everything that's going on. And sometimes focusing on the issues that are really important to you and then finding how candidates have things they've said in the past, how they've voted on things based on the issues that are important to you. Like, for example, I have a lot of friends and family in the LGBTQ plus community. And so issues like that have become really important to me because they're really important to people who are important to me. And so I've kind of been looking, for example, at how candidates, whether it's in local or national elections, view that issue because that issue has become a value in my life.
Following what Casey was saying, I think for me, even though I can't vote, I still like to understand different people's perspectives and opinions. And also like what Jack was saying, that I think when you read news, it's always going to be biased. It's always going to be one end or the other. But what's important to understand is kind of people's experiences from either the actions that's been done or the opinions. Like, for example, like if one party's saying one opinion, you should ask a whole load of people about how they feel about it. How does that affect them? And I think that's important in just understanding how a future action based on that thought could end up affecting others. And I think that's just a really good way to also broaden your own perspective.
I agree with both Jack and Melody about the importance of gaining other perspectives. An additional resource that I had used over the past couple of weeks was watching the debate. I thought that this was important because it allowed me to see how the candidates interact with each other and interact in a circumstance where a viewpoint is posed which is different than their own. And so I think it was just interesting, not in a news setting or Twitter or something, just to see like from the candidate themselves, like how they present themselves.
I'll say that I'm 100% guilty of not doing my research in years past of literally like all the issues. And I think now for me personally, I'm impacted in a different way because I'm paying taxes on a home in a district. I have a child who's attending the schools in the district. And so I'm involved and in a little bit deeper now, which is so selfish. It is completely selfish. I was talking to Coach Hendricks and I admitted to her that there have been years past when I was younger and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go in here past the presidential election. I'm just gonna go in here and I'm gonna pick based on who's the Democrat, who's the Republican, right? Like I'm just gonna go pick and make my choices from there. And I've come to realize like that was probably the most ignorant thing that I could have done because I wasn't, regardless of political party, there may be things and issues that they've been in favor of that again impact me, the people I love, the people I care about in different ways. And so I commend all of you for doing your research. Melody commends you for being informed, even though you're not voting. I can't say that as a college student athlete, I would have done the same because I didn't do the same. And so it's very commendable that all of you are as involved and engaged as you are. So who's influenced your decisions in relation to participation? So I know, and I'll speak from experience. So for me, I think to my parents, and you grow up in a household and your parents' values are your values. So sometimes your friend groups, what they're saying might be what you're valuing. So who's helped you all formulate your opinions?
I would say I have a little bit more of a unique kind of upbringing because my parents aren't US citizens. They are here on a green card. They're from Germany. So they have never voted when I grew up. And so they were never involved in politics, never had really political views in the US. So I never really was raised on their political values. I would say like a big thing for me was growing up like in middle school and high school, especially like how my teachers would discuss things. and how my friends would discuss things, I would say shaped me a lot. And I think more recently, also social media has had a really big impact too. And like the circles of people who I have on social media, I see what they're reposting and I see the things that they're sharing. And those are, you know, more resources that I'm being exposed to through them, which I would say has had a huge impact. And then as well as I'm a political science major, so I've taken a lot of classes revolving around politics. So kind of learning through that as well and like different policies has also had a big impact.
I kind of agree with a lot of that. So like, you know, we grow up around a lot of people in high school that's going to have a lot of different families having different opinions. So I kind of understand like how the friend group plays a role into it. And I'd say in my life, like my friend group has played maybe a minor role into it, but like at the same time, the people I associated with when I was younger kind of grew up in the same ideologies of not only my own parents, but my community. So I think my parents are probably the biggest factor, and I think that's the way it is for a lot of people. But other than that, I kind of stayed clear of social media for the past half year. I kind of got rid of all that, and it's kind of been relieving because I know, as Jack had mentioned earlier, it's just, you know, Twitter can be an unreliable source of political opinion. So that was kind of relieving, and that hasn't influenced me at all. But I think I'm pretty straightforward. How I grew up, how my parents thought is pretty much how I think, and I'm pretty proud of that. I really appreciated how they brought me up, and I think they did a great job teaching me what it's like to have an open mind. And they always tell me like, you can have your own opinions, like we're not going to judge you for them. These are our opinions, and I thought that open environment was also key to having a proper opinion when it comes to voting, because nobody should be able to tell you what to vote, but people can definitely influence you. So I think that's my 2 cents on it.
I grew up in a very similar household to Sam, where my parents had opinions, but their opinions, I would like to say their opinions have never shaped my own opinions. I, in the past year, have really separated how I'm going to progress forward in my own life versus how my parents progress in their life. And it's not in a negative way or positive way. It's just, I decided I wanted to live my life on my own terms, and these are my terms. But I think that a large group of people who influence me when making decisions about this stuff is the people who are impacted by my vote. So I grew up in a very, very sheltered hometown where there were not people of color, there were not people from outside of Hudson, Ohio, there was no internationals, nothing. So coming to Miami and getting to be with international teammates who had that scare this summer where we didn't know if they would be able to come back to campus, that's something that I've been exposed to now. Having friends in the LGBTQ plus community, they have brought me to show, like I could tell you exactly where I was when gay marriage was legalized. And that was a really exciting day for me and a lot of people in those communities because they got that given to them. So those are the people that I think influence me, the mass numbers of the people who I know are heavily affected by the decisions of these elections.
For me, it wasn't necessarily a person, it was more of a concept. And for me, it was really social inequality, honestly. You know, growing up throughout my life, you know, I've been fortunate enough, you know, to see the good parts of life, but, you know, my family's also been in some pretty unlucky situations. And just navigating that for the past 19 years, honestly, I just came to some conclusions, you know, about the direction I want my life to go. You know, I've seen a lot of my close friends and close family members, you know, make the wrong decisions due to miseducation about certain things and kind of just throw away their opportunities. I mean, talking real bright, real smart people who just were led the wrong way, or, you know, due to, you know, not even talking, you know, politicians, but just bad leadership, were misguided. And on a bigger scale, though, bad leadership can also turn this country for the worse. And so I just, you know, I made up in my mind, I never want to be a victim, you know, to a situation that I have some control over. And, you know, voting is the perfect opportunity for that. And so really just kind of the trials and tribulations and the lessons that I've been learning were kind of, you know, my big wake up call when I turned 18. Like, you know, you made it this far, you might as well, you know, use your fundamental right to keep creating the future you want for yourself.
So someone brought up social media. A couple of you brought up social media. And some of you brought up friends. So what conversations have you all had in your social circles regarding politics? Because I know in my social circles with my closest friends, like there are so many different identities, so many different fundamental beliefs, and we haven't really talked about politics. And I think it's because we're like, if we talk about politics and someone disagrees, we don't want a friendship to end. But what's your experience been like having conversations with your social circles?
I have a friend who has very different political beliefs than I do. And I grew up kind of in a city where most people had the same beliefs than I did. So when I came to Miami, that was kind of a shock for me. And it really taught me the value of listening, because I think often when we have political conversations, we don't listen to the other side. We kind of sit there with our beliefs in our head, ready to kind of be really defensive and come back with our own thoughts and opinions. And we don't even really hear what the other person is saying. And so I've really learned to value to kind of listen and, be open-minded about other people's beliefs. And I've found that when you listen, you learn, and then you can also, it also teaches you more about your own beliefs and your own values. And so I think that you can still have your own values and you can still be friends with people who might, see things in a different way, but listening has become, I think, a really important skill to have when having political conversations.
For me, honestly, I haven't really had a lot of conversations with my friends about voting because I feel like I don't have a voice and I don't want to be that person, that international student that gets judged for having an opinion about not even their own country. So something that I've done is listen a lot. And what Casey's been saying is that, when you have political conversations, people always get defensive about things, but the important part is listening to people's experiences. And I think when you have conversations with your friends, I don't think the aim should be to persuade them to get to your side, but it's to share your thoughts, your experiences, your opinions, your beliefs. And sharing your thoughts does not mean that you have to force your friends to have the same thing, but it's just being able to share, being able to encourage them to open their minds. I think that's what's important. And I think something that I've seen a lot within social media is just a lot of hatred or just blatant I said hatred. And I think that's not a way to talk to people about political issues, to have that peaceful and just a positive environment.
Yeah, I was unfriending and unfollowing people that I was friends with since grade school. Like, nah, I don't know about this friendship anymore, but I had to check myself. I got there. It became asking more questions, more so than anything, because you seek to understand. And so, like I said, I got there, but I probably unfriended a good 20 before I friended them back.
I think it's really important for everyone to just remember that there's only a handful of people that are really comfortable with sitting down and saying, here's what I think about politics, take it. I feel like a lot of us are still very much like on the edge, dipping our toe into the pool. Like, I don't really know if I want to jump into that yet. So I feel like if we all really just take a second to step back and say, so I've been thinking, and what do you think about this? Or could you tell me about this? Especially to the people who are in the pool, you could be like, hey, how do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I feel like we just kind of don't give ourselves enough credit. I don't know how many people in this conversation are very, very comfortable with their opinion, but I can just say that I'm here to say that I know what I know, and I know not a lot, but I'm here to learn. And I feel like that's something that's really important when approaching political conversations, especially in friend groups where, Bree, you mentioned you haven't spoken about it before.
I definitely agree with what Bree had said. I avoid political conversations with a lot of people, and I think that stems from the fact that, ever since I can really remember, politics affecting, my beliefs and things, any conversation I have with anybody who disagrees with me becomes blatantly disrespectful. And it's not a conversation where you're passing on opinions to each other. You're just kind of sitting there, not listening, just waiting to get the next word in. So it's not really a conversation I like having. But at the same time, it's a conversation we need to have. And I think, like, in our country, there's a really awful widespread conception where it's like where you're talking about politics, it's an argument, and I don't think it has to be that way. And I think that has to the shift in order to like really maintain change. Otherwise, it's just going to be a stalemate, and nobody's listening to each other. So ultimately, I've just avoided it, and I think I'll probably continue that for the time being. I would like to, start having those conversations, but I just find it really difficult, and I don't want to waste my time arguing with someone who's not going to listen.
I genuinely like understanding people, like, when they're, given certain views off and stuff. Like, I genuinely just want to hear what you have to say. Well, I agree with it. And, having maturity when someone's giving you a view that you just fundamentally can never agree with is one of the hardest things. Having to sit there and, say, I'm going to be an adult about this when you really want to just walk away is one of the hardest things. But I feel like even from people who we feel like, espouse even hateful or, just ignorant viewpoints, there's always something to learn from somebody. And then maybe it's to just stop talking to that person about certain viewpoints, or, to just know, maybe not to waste your time. But there's always something to learn from somebody's viewpoint. I've learned that regardless of what it is, there's something to learn in everything. And that's no different even with people you wildly disagree with, honestly. And then again, at the same time, though, I am a firm believer in you can believe two different things and still be friends or still be close. Like, I'm friends, most of my friends here, fundamentally there are some things, we disagree on, but those will still be, my best friends, well after I'm graduated from here. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this. If you're mature about this, regardless of where you and someone else stand, there's lifelong connections to be made, college and, beyond, just connecting with people and hearing different perspectives. I think that's a really empowering thing for you if you really mature about it and go about it the right way.
I agree with Sam. I found in the past that I've been more passive in the sense of, like, I don't bring up political conversations, or I try not to bring them up. Like Caleb said, I'm willing to listen and learn, but I think in a lot of settings that I've been in, it's hard to bring up, as Tori said, like, so I've been thinking this, what are your perspectives? Because a lot of time, I think people have their opinion in mind. And from my perspective, I don't want to go into a conversation or maybe something that could turn into an argument and not have all of my research done, if that makes sense. If we're talking about like a candidate or what you believe, like, I will admit I'm still pretty ignorant in the whole process, and there's definitely a lot more learning that I could do, part of which will come with talking to different people and getting different experiences, but also just doing research about what candidate X believes or what this person is going to go do. And so I think I don't always want to enter into the conversations because I don't want to make things up as it goes along. I'd rather talk about it in a way where I can back why I believe this in reference to a certain situation.
I've done a lot of question asking. So Sam, to your point, like, I've tried to remove myself from these spaces where I could be in conflict, but I also realize, like, I have a responsibility, like, even in my professional role, right? Like, I have a responsibility to be inclusive and open-minded to a lot of different people. I also understand that not everyone is ready to take that on. I know many of you are part of Champions for Life Leadership Academy, and some of the things that we've talked about are directly related to this, right? Being able to affirm people and understand a different perspective while not necessarily agreeing with it. And also understanding that it's really not about the expectations that other people have for you, but it's about the expectations that you have for yourself. And so if I could give one piece of advice, it would be to understand what your character is and what your values are, and be the leader to start the conversation. Sit down one-on-one. I know I've had conversations, and I've chosen to have those conversations in person to make it seem less threatening, so that people can see body language. Maybe we share a meal. Food makes people happy, right? To get to this point of understanding and make it so it's less threatening. So we talked a little bit about, some of you have voted already, I believe. How many of us have voted already? Okay, I have not yet voted, so I'm where Jack is. Like, I think I'm ready to go, but I'm not quite ready to go. I know I don't want to go on election day. If you haven't voted yet, what's your plan? Can you share with the group what your plan is to vote?
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of in a sticky situation where I can't really go home just because of COVID. So I'm kind of just still weighing out some of my options of what I can and can't do. And then I'm gonna kind of go from there. There's some deadlines coming up and stuff, so I kind of got to make my decision quick here.
So my greatest decision right now is whether to go on my own in the morning after I drop my daughter off at school, or to take her with me, because what I experienced growing up and how I knew I was always going to vote is because my parents took us to the polls with them. And I remember the excitement of seeing my mom, and at that point it was paper, right? Fill out this paper ballot, and wanting to do that so badly. And so there was this excitement that was already built up. And so I think that we can't come to understand what the expectation is or educate people if they're not seeing it and it's not folded into the fabric of what they do all the time. And so trying to set the foundation for my daughter, because like Tori, you said, there have been so many people throughout history who share our identity as women to go through these struggles of not being able to vote. And so my plan is to vote in person. I know I had requested an absentee ballot, but I actually went to the Board of Elections and I suspended that ballot to be able to do it in person because I really wanted to be there in person to do it.
Something that really stood out to me, the family that I spoke about that I nannied for, the family that's friends with them that has the fathers running for the House of Representatives, there's a picture that the mom posted on Facebook that was really powerful to me. She brings her daughters to every single political event that they can bring their daughters to go to, since their daughters have been infants, because not only are children, if they're brought up in politics, brought up like going to with your parents to vote, not only does that make them get excited and get comfortable, but it also inspires women who are moms, women who aren't moms, women who are just young and not really sure what they want to do. It allows them to be inspired to get involved in policymaking, voting, any of that. So if you have like a younger sibling, a child, I would definitely encourage bringing them and just starting to get them included and get them excited, like you said, Bree.
So as we get ready to close up, I'm going to allow you all to share one piece of advice to people as they prepare to vote this election season.
One piece of advice I'd share is when I went to early vote, I didn't really realize, like, no matter what time of day, how long the line is going to be, even early voting. So I think on election day, it's going to be even more hectic. So doing it before is definitely a lot less stressful. You don't really have to worry about the deadline, and you can get it done. And, you know, waiting in line is boring, but it's going to be a lot longer the closer you get to that election cycle. So getting it done early, that's the advice I would give.
My advice is if you have an absentee ballot, to make sure that you're putting the correct amount of postage on there. I know there's a little, mine came with a little sheet of paper that said, make sure you attach 55 cents of postage to this. And I said, I don't really know what 55 cents of postage is. So I went to the post office and I asked them, and they got me set up and they got me squared away so I know my ballot's getting counted.
I would say the key thing is to remember that your vote is your business. You know, I feel like there are a lot of people who may ask, who are you voting for? That is completely your business. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing that, you are under no obligation to do so. So that's what I would say. Don't be ashamed of your decision, but that is your business. And if you want to keep it to yourself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I'd say the big thing for me is don't look at the determination or like who somebody votes for as like a characteristic, as like who they are as a person. You know, it's kind of like the ACT. If somebody sees somebody has a low ACT score, it doesn't mean that they're not smart. You know, so I think it's just like really important to understand like who people vote for. It doesn't mean that that person is that candidate. You know, or encompasses everything about that candidate. Each person is unique, and there might be certain qualities or reasons that they're voting for that person, and that's their own personal choice.
My advice is that whether if you haven't voted yet, whether you've already picked a decision or not, Try to put yourself in other people's shoes just to try to understand. And if you don't be afraid to ask why, whether if it's just to yourself or to others. But I think it's so important to try to think about how others might be affected by your decision. And whatever you pick, you don't have to share with people. I don't think it would say anything badly about you, but what's important is just trying to understand others.
I would just say make sure you're taking the time to inform yourself. Athletics has had a lot of resources, a lot of different things in Miami have, shared resources for how to inform yourself, and like informing yourself for like the local election as well. Like Tori said, her dad lost by like a number of individual votes. And so just making sure that you know what you're voting for, what the candidates are standing for, so that your voice is being shared.
I agree with Casey. I think doing your research, and just gaining knowledge is really important. And also don't be afraid to reach out to others if you need help. I know I called Bree a couple weeks ago because I needed help trying to figure out how to get the process going and how to vote from Oxford to be in my home state. And so that was helpful because it was something I was a little bit unsure about, but I'm a lot more sure now and more confident. So I think not being afraid to reach out to people who have done it before, or even if they haven't done it before, don't be afraid to start the hard process.
Yeah, I think everybody's hit on it, but I would just say be intentional. What's important to you, it's your vote. So just doing the research, stay away from party, do all this. Be intentional about your vote and have a purpose.
So my last piece of advice to people is just go vote. We can't complain about the current condition or the situation if you don't participate, and understanding that it's actually a privilege. There are people who don't have the opportunity to vote. And so we need to take our privileges seriously and understand that this is a privilege. And so thank you all for joining us for RedHawk Real Talk. We know that you all are leaders in this athletic department, and we appreciate you for coming into this space and hope that it is encouraging for other people to see that it's okay to have conversations with people regardless of where you come from or your belief systems. The biggest thing is having the conversation. So thank you all.